All right, guys. Hey, I apologize that apparently for some unknown reason, I actually think it's my camera, but I really don't know. So I apologize. Apparently my first video, once I shared my screen, you guys couldn't hear me. So I'm just going to do this from this perspective, just with the notes, which I don't like to do. But I want to make sure you get this information. So I am doing just a quick lecture from chapter 7 on deviance, and I'm just covering a few of the slides there in the middle. I'm starting on slide number 12. So these are the notes that you do have on D2L, but it's for chapter 7, and I'm starting on slide 12. So the deviance chapter, of course, is talking about things that go excuse me, against the norms, or things that, crime is lumped in there as well. And part of what we talk about when we talk about crime and deviance is we talk about things like social control, which is really all it is really enforcing the norms around you. That can be things like, your mom shooting you that look when you're talking too loud and you should be quiet, to, a social control. A negative sanction might be to put someone in jail. So that's kind of what those are talking about there. Positive sanctions are things that are given to reward behavior, where negatives are punishments to try to uh they're punishments for violating norms. Informal are face-to-face, everyday things, where formal are formal and recognized. So like putting somebody in jail would be a negative formal sanction. A positive informal might be a teacher that says good job. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about social control. Where I really wanted to talk quickly is about the theories. So the theories of crime and deviance, looking at functionalism. We always think about Durkheim talking about, ideas of suicide, but one of the things that Durkheim looked at in general was people's ties to society. And, one of the things that he talks about is that deviance in general, just the general idea of deviance, can help society progress. Deviance, like when we think about functionalism, we think of what is the role of something, or what is the point of something in society. So Durkheim says deviance, the role of it is to help society progress, but it also is there, deviance is there to challenge people's views, to reaffirm social norms through punishment, and to lead to this idea of collective consciousness, meaning that it brings people together. So, he is saying, Durkheim says the role of deviance is to challenge people's views, to reaffirm or confirm, or help people clarify their social norms of whatever's going on, and then that the pulling together of people and the reaffirming social norms leads to this idea of the collective conscious, where basically you build a community because you all think the same way. So that's kind of what Durkheim is talking about. Now we get Merton that talks about strain theory, and Merton kind of looks at this from, again, the same perspective as Durkheim. What is the role of it? But also from the perspective of people's relationship to society. And how close or not do people feel to their community? People that have a strong tie to their community conform to the norms and values. People that don't feel a strong tie, or really, really rebel against any sort of goals of society. These are very extremists, like terrorists or freedom fighters, but they don't feel as high to society. And then kind of in between, innovators, they want to pursue goals. They want to, excuse me. Sorry, I needed a drink of coffee there. Innovators say, yeah, society says I should do this, but I'm not sure how to get there by legitimate means. So maybe I'm gonna, I'm gonna do this crime to help me meet that goal. I am supposed to pay my rent, but I can't do that, so I'm going to rob somebody to get the rent money. That kind of stuff. Ritualism, people who lower their goals until they can reach them through socially acceptable ways. Um, these people, members of society, say, oh, you know what, I'm never going to have that big giant house or that fancy car or whatever it is, but I'm going to lower my goals. And I'm going to say, you know what, but I'm happy in my, modest house, or I'm happy in my, used car or whatever it is. And then retreatism are people that really have retreated from society, are homeless. They feel very lost. They feel withdrawn from society. The idea behind strain really is that looking at people's ties to society and how strong their tie is with conformity, or how they don't feel a real tie to society with rebellion. And then I'm not really worried about social disorganization. There are better theories, so I actually skipped that. So your big two for functionalism are Durkheim's ideas about how society helps, and then Merton's strain theory. When we look at conflict theory, we are always looking at, every time you hear conflict theory, it is always power of somebody over someone else. Now, let me also apologize. These are not my slides. These are from the textbook publisher. They spelled right incorrectly. It's C. Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, not right, R-I-G-H-T. So conflict theory always looks at who has power over others. And always, 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 when we think about conflict theory, we think about Karl Marx. But again, even though sometimes people have this, the kind of view of Karl Marx as, a communist or wanting socialism and all that. And yes, that's true. But if you look here, social control is affected by the strength of social bonds. Marx is saying the same thing that Merton and Durkheim talked about, your ties to society. He's just saying it from the perspective of your ties to your social bonds that you have. And we'll talk about it later, how somebody has power over someone else. Now, C. Wright Mills talks about the power elite. And he says that, the people in power are the ones that make the decisions and, have all the influence. So I always think this is interesting. From 2000 to 2019, 51 NFL players were convicted of domestic violence. They were collectively sentenced to a total of 49 days in jail, which is thought to be far lower than the collective sentences of 51 other people convicted of the same crimes. And so again, the idea is, and this example is saying because they were NFL players, they got, a day or less in jail, never did jail time. Quite honestly, I get what they're saying. And yes, can we talk about, if Elon Musk wants something, he's going to get it. If Bill Gates wants something, the owner of Microsoft, he's going to get it. If the owner of Apple wants something, or whoever, some of the bigger power people, the rich, if we look at the Forbes 500, 400 richest Americans, if those people if Oprah wants something, Oprah's getting it. And that's what C. Wright Mills is talking about. I would argue, honestly, I wish they had a better example than the NFL players. I get what they're saying, but I don't really know, especially in the state of Illinois. I'm not really sure that there is much more time spent in jail for domestic violence crimes here in the state of Illinois. Now, I could be wrong. I don't really know what these NFL players, they were convicted of domestic violence, but, okay, was it a criminal charge? Was it an order of protection? What was it? We don't know what it was. So keep that in the back of your mind too. But I get what they were saying about, people, how many times do we see, especially sports people, have to kind of get a slap on the hand and go on, go on with their life. So conflict theory is always going to look at power and control, and we can take that a little bit further. And if we start looking at crime, we can look at crime as, let's say, the police or the law enforcement or attorneys or judges having power over those that are committing crimes. And then symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interaction is always looking at how you see something or how something is seen. So in general, symbolic interactionism is how you are seen by others. Doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be gender, it could be education, it could be religion, whatever. How is gender seen? How is education seen? How is, religion seen? For this, it's crime and deviance, and it looks at how criminals are seen, how we label them based on the fact that they have committed a crime. One of the things with criminals is that, once they're convicted of a felony and they go out and apply for a job, they have to mark that box that says they've been convicted of a felony. The problem is that, then who's going to hire them? If you mark, yeah, I'm a convicted felon, who's going to hire them? So it's this idea that their primary deviance, or what they did to be labeled as a criminal, that's their primary deviance. But they get out there in the world and they realize that people, even though they've done their time, people aren't going to see them any different, so they might as well be a criminal. That's their secondary deviance. And the problem with labeling theory is that we encourage their label as a, let's say, felon or criminal. That becomes their master status, and they, as well as everybody else, start seeing them as a criminal. So one of the things I want you to do for this section is to, in a text box for me, I want you to think about a time where you thought something about someone and it turned out to be incorrect. So you have to think about it a little bit, but I don't care. Doesn't necessarily have to be a crime. But it can be someone that was sitting in your class, or something you heard about somebody that turned out to not be correct. Think about a time where that happened and put that in the text box that is attached onto this video, as part of your grade for this. Okay. So think about a time where you might have labeled somebody, and it doesn't have to be criminal. It can just be that maybe you labeled somebody as smart, or maybe you labeled somebody as annoying, or a bad person, or whatever, and they turned out to not be. Okay. So that's one of the things I want you to do. And then finally, I wanted to touch base about techniques of neutralization. Techniques of neutralization are basically, and again, these are not my notes, so I apologize. There's a typo in there. That should be significant. There we go. Techniques of neutralization are the way that people justify their actions. So they deny responsibility. They say that it wasn't their fault that they did something, or they say that they didn't do it. It must have been this other person. Denial of injury. The person doesn't see their actions as significant. Wow, this is a really bad typo on here. Significant because no one was hurt. Well, it doesn't matter if I drove home drunk. I didn't hurt anybody. Nobody was hurt. In the same tone, if there's no victim, there's no crime. So your chapter kind of talks about the idea of victimless crimes. Someone that gambles, in certain situations, gambling could be considered a victimless crime. No, you technically should not gamble except in places like casinos. But that is that March Madness, or that Super Bowl squares, or that bracket. Technically those are against the law. I know, I hear you. But denial of the victim, if there is no victim, there is no crime. Again, I'm not advocating for this, but prostitution, if it is two consenting adults, there's nobody's hurting anybody, nobody's doing drugs, none of that. But if it's two consenting adults, one who happens to pay the other for their service, um, yes, that's against the law. But, there was no victim, so there is no crime. Nobody was hurt. So again, I'm not advocating for that, but some people think about it that way. Condemnation of the condemners. Try to blame others. I actually had a former client that said to me that if the police officer would have just minded his own business, this client would not have been arrested. No, you were arrested because they ran license plates and found out that you had an expired driver's license, like really expired, like, I'm sorry, not expired, a suspended license. And that person was driving. But, oh no, but it was the officer's fault. No. And then finally, appeal to higher authority. You know, I did it for the good of society, or I stole bread to feed my family, or I did it because God told me to do it, or whatever. That their actions were for a higher purpose. Well, that person hurt somebody that I love, so I took their life. These are ways that criminals especially try to justify what they are doing. Now you may have heard people say things like, oh, it wasn't my fault. It must have been somebody else's fault. Or maybe they said things that were condemnation of the condemners. You never know. It doesn't always have to be crime related. It can be other related as well. Okay, so you have one assignment here with your to put in a text box. The last thing I want you to put in a text box is come back here and let's see, which one do we want to do? Let's do, I guess here's what I want you to do. Just give me just a summary of one of the major theories. So either functionalism, and I would choose Robert Martin's strain theory, conflict theory, or symbolic interaction. Just give me a brief, 2 or 3 sentences of what those are in general about. Don't just copy and paste from the slides, but just tell me in your own words what one of them, only one, you only have to do one. So tell me what functionalism says about crime, or give me a summary of Merton's strain theory. You could give me a summary of what conflict theory is about. You could give me a brief summary about what symbolic interactionism is about. Okay, so you have 2 things to put in the text box. Make sure that you do that by the due date. And yeah, that is all.